I'm excited to have everybody here tonight and excited to share with you what I put together. I've been wanting to do something like this for many years and basically have just never taken the time to think through all the things that I'd want to say until now. So basically tonight is going to be an overview of the most important things I've learned over the last 9 years in the world of ACT prep, specifically as it pertains to parents and things that most parents who call us don't know about college admissions and the ACT. I'm going to start off just by telling you a little about myself and my background, and then we'll jump right into it. My name is Bobby Nicholson, and I'm the president of Outliers Advantage, ACT Prep Academy. My background is very different than what most of you are probably expecting. I was the worst student ever when I was in high school. I went to Farragut. I was one of those. I had to retake Algebra 1 5 times. And I actually eventually dropped out of high school. I never finished. And then when I was trying to make it in the real world without having a high school diploma, I realized that things were not going to go as I had hoped. I got my GED, enrolled at Pellissippi State, and was fortunate enough to have mentors take me under their wings and teach me how to be successful at school and life. And it worked. I did really well at Pellissippi. I made almost perfect straight A's when I was there. I made almost a Berg 100 in every math class that I took when I was there. I was president of my student body. I made it on USA Today's All Tennessee academic team. And after I graduated from Maryville College, I won the International Student Excellence Award for the transition that I had from high school to college. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I graduated, but I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life being to others what my mentors in college had been to me. And we originally were trying to start a nonprofit for at-risk youth to help prepare them to be successful in college. And we were trying to find a way to make a living doing this. And the things that we had that were monetizable, that were in line with our mission, were ACT prep and tutoring. So I started doing that on the side to see if there was demand. And I ended up filling up, started hiring some others to help out. And lo and behold, 9 years later, I have coached more than 1,000 students on the ACT. We have 20 employees at Outliers, and I'm talking to you about college admissions. So my experience gives me a very different perspective than what you're going to hear from most educators. And the ACT is the only thing that I do in life right now, and the only thing I've done for many years. I eat, breathe, and live this test. So even though I'm going to tell you some things that will probably be different than what you've heard elsewhere, I hope you will be open-minded to considering what I have to share. I will leave the disclaimer that I am not an admissions expert, and it is possible that some of the things I will say tonight will be inaccurate. And I hope that you see these things I say as just something to take into consideration and to do your research on your own. I do recommend going ahead and taking out a piece of paper and a pen, as I am going to be covering a lot of different topics and pretty quick. That will help you make the most of what we talk about tonight. The general outline for what we're going to cover tonight as far as the sections go, we're going to start with college, and then GPA, then we're going to go over scholarships, then the ACT, then resources, then self-prepping for the ACT. So for each of these different categories, I'm going to be focusing on things that most parents who call us don't know. So these aren't necessarily the most important things. We've tried to veer away from things that pretty much everybody already knows. But we will cover some things I'm sure that all of you have heard before, but hopefully even the most seasoned professionals will learn about a couple of things that they've either not thought about or haven't heard of before. So we'll go ahead and jump into it, beginning on the topic of college. So most things that parents think about and students think about when they're deciding on where to go to college are great things. But there are two things that we have noticed that a lot of students and parents aren't taking into consideration when they are thinking about which schools they want to spend the next 4+ years of their life at. And you know, those two things that we'll start off with are the people and the opportunities that students are going to be surrounding themselves with in their time that they are there. And that question might sound simple enough, but hopefully we'll see as we talk about some of the other topics in college, how it applies in ways that you might not be thinking. And you know, one thing that we commonly hear that prompts this question is parents thinking that, you know, one school is teaching the same material as another school. So what makes this school better than this other school? And maybe it's not. Maybe it's not a good extra use of money or time or other considerations, but sometimes it is. And you know, it does really matter. The culture, which is mainly made up of the students and the caliber of the students that they are surrounding themselves during their time that they're there. And one specific area that this applies to is dropout rates. So this is the most depressing thing that we're going to talk about tonight. So it will be much more uplifting when we go beyond this. But I think it's important enough to talk about, not because it applies to probably any of your students as far as whether or not they're at risk for dropping out of college or not. But it is important to think about as far as the caliber of the students and just being mindful of these numbers and what it might affect in your decision-making process. So I'm going to ask everybody a question, and you don't have to answer this question out loud. I just want everybody to think about this question. It's going to be actually 3 questions, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit just to see where you're framing things right now. And those 3 questions are, first, what would you guess is the success rate / dropout rate of students who start college? What percentage of students who start college actually graduate from college? And then we'd ask you that same question for community college. What would you guess is the number of, or the percentage of students who start at a community college who graduate? And then the third is, what is the percentage of students who test into developmental classes who will graduate? So just think about those 3 numbers, and I'm going to give you the answers. And all of this information is from educationdata.org. So if it doesn't ring true to you, I hope that you will investigate it on your own. Because it is depressing. The first answer, what percentage of students who start college will actually graduate, is 60%. So 60% of students who start college will actually graduate, starting at a 4-year college, the national average. Obviously, every school has different amounts, and those are things that we encourage everybody to look up. But the national average is that 60% of students will graduate a 4-year degree within 6 years. The answer to the community college number, and they started a community college, is that only 40% of students who started a community college will graduate from any degree. So that means 60% of students who start at a community college will not graduate. And the last number is what percentage of students who test into developmental classes will graduate. And the answer to that question is that 25%, only 25% of students who test into developmental classes will ever graduate from any college. This doesn't have a year metric on it. That means 75% of students who test into a developmental class will never get a degree from a post-secondary education. So I am obviously a huge proponent of community colleges. I think that they are an incredible tool. I am the product of a community college education. So I'm in no way speaking bad about community college. I think it is an incredible opportunity for students who didn't do the right things in high school to have a second chance at life and education. But because of those numbers, it does give us some hesitation in recommending doing the 2 free years of community college. Mainly, if nothing else, just thinking about if the environment of the students that you're surrounding yourself with and surrounding the opportunities that students are being surrounded with in those 2 years are the best use of those 2 years and worth the money that you save. And you know, where every situation is different, and a lot of them, it makes a lot of sense. This is just something that we hope that families will consider when they are making that decision. And then when they're making the decision of a 4-year college, of also deciding and thinking about the caliber of students that they're going to be surrounding themselves with, and if that's going to be conducive to where they are at in their caliber. Is it going to be challenging them and helping them grow? And, you know, there are lots of ways to do that amongst every school that students do attend. You know, the honors program is also a great place to increase the density of the caliber of students that your students are going to surround themselves with in the time that they are at college. But all this is just something that we've noticed that many students and parents aren't spending enough time thinking about in their consideration of where they go to college, that we hope that more will. So that's the most pressing topic we'll talk about. Now we're going to jump to some other things on the topic of college. We have 2 more things on the topic of college. And these are just some pitfalls really that we want to warn parents about, not because they happen a lot, but because when they do happen, it's devastating. So the first thing is graduating early. All right. For some students, graduating early makes a lot of sense. But one mistake that is devastating that some parents learn too late is they'll graduate early in December, and then they'll enroll at a community college for the spring, and then they, you know, will apply to their college. But the problem is that if you do that, you are then viewed in the eyes of your 4-year college as a transfer student and not a freshman student. And therefore you are often not eligible for the freshman scholarships at that school. So just something that we have seen the devastating side of from parents over the last 9 years that we thought worth sharing for any on the journey. The best option, you know, we think if you're wanting to do that route is instead of graduating early, just take dual enrollment classes and AP classes so that you're still getting the college credit. But yeah, so next, we're going to talk about applying early. So applying early, to, early decision to some of these schools. Yeah, so early decision. If you are trying for a competitive school and you're worried about getting accepted, early admission is great. And for most schools across the country, doing early decision is just not going to change anything. But some research has shown that for students applying early decision, some schools will offer less scholarship money than students with the same resume and background who apply regular decision because they know that you want to go there. So if scholarships is a priority, you might just want to do your research on if applying early, you might be losing some opportunity for scholarship dollars if you do that. So just something to consider when you are in that phase of the admissions process. So this, these are the main things that we want to talk about on the college stuff. Nothing crazy on there. I see that we don't have any questions over on the chat. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to our next section, which is GPA. And as far as advice goes, the reason we're starting with this before other things is because it's the hardest to fix and the most common requirement of admissions that parents who call us are unaware of different metrics about it. So we're just going to talk about the most common things that parents learn too late about GPA. And I'm going to ask you all another question that I want you to just think about the answer. You don't have to answer out loud. But what would you guess is the minimum GPA to get merit-based scholarship money at UT? Would you guess is the minimum GPA to get merit-based scholarship money at UT? And the answer to that is a 3.8 GPA. That's weighted, 3.8 weighted GPA. Therefore, even if your student has a 36 on the ACT, they will likely not get $1 of merit-based scholarship money from UT unless they have a 3.8 GPA. And I can't tell you the number of times that we have spoken with students who have a 3.7 GPA when they're applying. And it's detrimental to not be aware of that number from the beginning. If you're not going to UT, there are two GPA numbers that are important to keep in mind. The first one is 3.75 is the minimum GPA to achieve the second level of the HOPE scholarship called the GAMS, the General Assembly Merit Scholarship. And this is a great thing because it has an ACT requirement as well. And we'll talk about that when we get to the ACT section. But you need to know that you need to have a 3.75 weighted GPA to be able to qualify for that. And you get it to any school that you go to in Tennessee. So it's a great thing. At most other colleges, 3.5 GPA is the most common low number to be scholarship eligible, regardless of what your ACT score is. So, 3.5 is what we really, want to stay above while you are in high school. And specifically, a 3.5 GPA /3.75, slash 3.8 for UT by the end of your junior year. All right. And the reason being GPA deadlines. You may have never heard that word because I just made it up. But it is something that might have a word, but we never hear about it. And we rarely hear parents know about this. But at many of the larger universities, pre-COVID, COVID has changed some things, but we imagine that it's going to go back to this. But pre-COVID, they're only looking, the bigger universities are only looking at your GPA from your freshman through your junior year of high school. A student can lose their admission or their scholarships based on how they do their senior year, but they cannot gain it based on how they do their senior year. So this is, a lot of families, they have a 3.7 GPA at the end of their junior year. They're wanting to go to UT. They're hoping that before they apply, they can get it up to that 3.8 GPA. But the reality is the application deadline is before they're going to get the results back from fall of their senior year. And therefore, it's just going to be freshman through junior year at many of these large universities. So being mindful of your school's GPA deadline and other deadlines are just as important as knowing the actual application deadlines and other aspects that most parents do know. So the next thing we want to talk about as far as GPA goes is what a GPA measures. If you are only taking this, or if you're only taking one metric into consideration, the GPA is the best single metric to determine how a student will do in college. And sometimes the ACT, sometimes people use this fact to bash the ACT. But the reality is that the GPA and the ACT measure two different things. And even though the GPA alone is better at predicting success than ACT scores alone, the GPA and ACT scores together are significantly better at predicting how well a student will do in college than GPA alone. And, regardless of whether, you're a fan of the ACT or not, we can go different ways. The statistics do show that it is useful when combined on those metrics. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. But GPA is mostly measuring how hard a student works and how good they are at taking care of their responsibilities. The GPA has almost no correlation with how a student is going to do on the ACT. And we'll talk about what does later. But a lot of you are going to be very dissatisfied when your student takes the ACT for the first time, if they haven't yet, to learn they have an awesome GPA and don't do so well on the ACT. The ACT is more a measure of the mastery level of understanding of the basics of grammar, math, reading speed and comprehension, and science reasoning. So those are the three things about GPA that we see are missed by so many families that we wanted to make sure that you all got tonight. So I see that there are no questions on the chat. That's all good. We are going to go ahead and jump into the next section then, which I'm sure many of you are wanting to know more about, which is scholarships. And we just had a question pop up, and I will get to that here shortly. That is a great question. Can a student take the ACT too many times? We'll definitely get to that. But yeah, feel free to keep those questions coming. But as far as scholarships go, the first thing I'm going to say about scholarships is that things have changed a lot. There are so many things to say about scholarships, but we had to narrow it down to the most useful to everyone. So we're only going to talk about the most common things that parents don't know when they call us. So the most important development that is, probably different, even if you had younger kids a while back, is guaranteed scholarships. And the best way to talk about guaranteed scholarships is to compare them to competitive scholarships, which when most parents call us, when they talk about scholarships, most of the time what they're thinking about is competitive scholarships. And a competitive scholarship is where, students have to reach a certain bar to make them eligible. And then they, usually will write an essay, and they are competing against all of the other eligible students for a board to decide which of, who of these students to give these scholarships to. Whereas guaranteed scholarships are what many schools, if not most schools across the nation, are going to more and more. And the way a guaranteed scholarship works is that if you have a GPA and a certain GPA and a certain ACT score, you are guaranteed a certain amount of money per year if you attend that college. And this makes it way easier for families to know ahead of time roughly the scholarship portion of the money that they are going to be receiving if they decide to go to this school. They still might get some additional competitive scholarships on top of that, but we have found that most of our students, the majority of their scholarships are comprised of the guaranteed scholarships that they got, which makes it way easier for you to, know what you're going to get. And we will say, we had a question about the COVID effect on schools not requiring the ACT. And every school that we have spoken with that had guaranteed scholarships in place has told us that if a student does submit ACT scores, they will still honor the guaranteed scholarships that they had posted prior to COVID. That might not be the case at every school, but it is certainly the case at the majority of schools that our students have been going to, that we have reached out with to ensure that those are still in place. Another thing that we have also noticed, of the COVID impact is that the students who do submit ACT scores are getting the scholarship dollars, and the students who do not submit ACT scores are competing against a much larger pool of students, and primarily on GPA alone. So if you're competing against schools that have more GPA inflation than your school, it could be to your, dissatisfaction, the scholarship dollars that you are end up getting offered compared to your student's caliber. So some of you, it might make more sense to go the route of not submitting ACT scores, and we hope you'll talk to your school counselor and the admission staff at that school to, make the determination there. But we have seen students just recently in this last month who got turned down at UT with a 3.49 GPA who did not submit ACT scores. So that is, just something to take in consideration as you're navigating the differences with the COVID. And nobody really knows how it's going to settle. Everybody has speculations with what it's going to be. Are they ever going to require ACT? We don't know. We're just going under the auspice of what it still is right now. And, that's all we can do. So as far as with the guaranteed scholarship model, part of the reason that is important is that the single best way to get scholarship money right now is through GPA and ACT scores. Obviously, I'm biased in that this is how I make a living, is on the ACT, but I hope you're not taking my word for it. I mean, reach out to your school counselors because so many families are spending so much time searching for scholarships, filling out scholarship essays and applications to maybe get a handful of single time, issued scholarships, when if they would have just invested the same amount of time in getting their GPA/ACT scores up, they would have ended up getting so much more return for the same amount of time invested in filling out all of these scholarship applications. And that was something I forgot about the guaranteed scholarship model. Most of them do not require any scholarship applications or essays. It's just if you have the GPA and the ACT scores, you are guaranteed that money at these different schools. So it is a beautiful thing. And it has been our experience, that for every 25 hours of prep a student puts in to prepping for the ACT, they will increase 1 composite point. And 1 composite point on average turns into $2,500 of scholarship money over 4 years. So that averages out to students making about $100 an hour for every hour that they invest into ACT prep. And we don't care who you go to, or if you self-prep or what way you go. But if scholarships are important to you, and, like I said, don't take my word for it. Please reach out to others. The easiest possible hack you have to get scholarship dollars is the ACT and GPA scores. And we've actually put together a guide for everyone to help you know what scholarship money you have available. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all here. And this is on our website. Website is actprep.com. If you scroll to the top, you will see this part that says it pays to prep. And that is our scholarship guide. And we've just made it easy for you to find your ACT score and GPA and see how much money you would get at these different schools. So we have it broken down per year over 4 years with HOPE and GAMS. And we also have the amount for you to pay after the scholarship. So even though some of these schools give huge amounts of scholarship money, it still may be a better deal for you to go to a school where you might not even get any scholarship money because of how much is still left to pay after that scholarship. And some of these numbers are way lower than what families are thinking. I mean, you're seeing here 18s, 19s. Maryville College gives $19,000 per year, $76,000 over 4 years for a 19 on the ACT with no GPA requirement. So this is a tool for you to be able to find these scholarships easily. We also give you some other numbers to consider in your college decision. And the 2 numbers that I'm going to point you to today are the students who return after the first semester. This is something that most parents and students aren't taking into consideration in choosing their school. But if this number is really low, then there's something funny going on there. Students who go there, if, only 58% of them are coming back after the first year. I mean, I'm not trying to call anybody out here, but, that's a red flag that you might want to consider as to why that is. We've also put the average salary after graduation. Averages are a horrible thing to use in most things, and it's probably no different here because of how big of a difference there is in majors. But this is just something to take into consideration, to decide on if your investment is the best investment that you could be making with your years and dollars. So, we will admit that, these are from College Scorecard, and they have stopped publishing these numbers. So these are from a few years ago, the last year that they were publishing. Now they do a span, but we're giving you these numbers to just give you a starting point to consider some of these different things. So you can find these, like I said, just on our website, Wall Rates. If you scroll down to the red, the ones highlighted in red, those are your full tuition scholarships. We also have done the same thing for out of state. So these, the one I just showed you, these are for in-state. Most of you that are on here today, I'm imagining, are from Tennessee, but we have also done it for out-of-state. These are all guaranteed scholarships. I forgot to mention on the last one, we list on here if they are or are not guaranteed scholarships. But on the out-of-state scholarship guide, we have only included guaranteed scholarships. So you can just scroll down and find your GPA and ACT scores. And we have hundreds of scholarships here from across the country. Same thing, highlighted in red means it's a full tuition scholarship. So this is available. We update it every year. And obviously it's probably going to be changed once your students are applying to college. But this is just a starting point to help you consider schools that you might not be considering right now. So that is a little something that hopefully some of you will find useful. One second here. So I'm going to jump over to a question now before we go to the next section, which is ACT. It says, do you recommend AP over dual enrollment? And the only thing I'm going to say about that is that we do see an impact on students' ACT scores based off of AP and IB classes that they take, but we do not see an impact on students' ACT scores with dual enrollment classes. So a student who takes a ton of dual enrollment classes, we don't see a big difference from their ACT score before they took any of those dual enrollment classes. Where if a student takes a ton of AP classes before they took their ACT and after they take their ACT, we notice a big jump in their ACT scores. So that's the 2 cents I can share on our opinion on that. So thank you for that question. All right, we're gonna go down to the ACT now. And I'm gonna say a lot of things about the ACT. They're going to contradict what most of you have heard or think about it. And this is one area where there are a few people in the world who know this test better than me. I eat, breathe, and live this test, and it's really all that I've done for most of my hours for the last 9 years of my life. So, but even so, I'm not asking you to take my word for anything I'm about to say. You can test everything yourself. I just can't encourage you enough to know that so much of the information out there about the ACT is just plain wrong. And we have data to back up everything I'm going to say here. So you're welcome to challenge me on any of it during the question and answer section. And I'm open to being wrong. If the data shows something that I'm not considering, then, I'll change my mind. But this is what I have been persuaded of that most parents and students and schools have wrong about the ACT when they call us. So and I've narrowed it down. I can obviously talk about this topic forever, but these are the things that are most consequential as far as parents and students go. So one of the big questions that we get asked a lot are when to take the ACT. And I'm just going to answer it first, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I'm answering that way. The easy answer to this is as soon as you can after your student has taken Algebra 2 and Geometry. So as soon as you can. When should you take it and start prepping? You should take it and start prepping as soon as you can after the completion of Algebra 2 and Geometry. So I've been telling families for a long time that the ACT is a middle school test. Everything a student needs to score a 28 or above on English, reading, and science has been taught by the end of 8th grade. A large portion of the math section is over pre-algebra and Algebra 1. Most smart students have taken those by the end of 8th grade. There are only 4 questions per test. on the science section that require outside science knowledge. Everything else is testing a student's ability to read charts and graphs and think scientifically. There are tons of parents who wait until students complete trigonometry and calculus before taking the ACT, but there are only 4 trig questions and no true calculus questions on the ACT. There's sometimes one question that looks like a calculus question, but can be taught to an 8th grader. And most of the trig questions can be taught to an 8th grader without any experience with trigonometry or pre-calc. Therefore, we have found that most students' math scores will actually start to come down the longer they wait after Algebra 2 and geometry. In the last 6 months, just to prove the point, we have had a 9th grader in our program score 33 on the ACT, a 9th grader, a 10th grader who scored a perfect 36 on their ACT. Neither of these students were geniuses. So how is it possible for a 9th grader to score a 33 if the test is mainly covering material taught in high school? We also have a 7th grader who's starting our program this month, and she scored a 26 on her pre-class ACT with no prep, hitting a 28 on English and a 30 on reading. AP and IB classes, like I said a second ago, certainly have a positive impact on ACT scores, as do Algebra 2 and geometry. But outside of those, we do not see a ton of movement beyond around 2 to 3 points from a student's freshman to their junior year. So we can't emphasize enough to not necessarily plan on doing the school's model of waiting until the spring of your junior year, which is a very common ACT date that all of the juniors take the ACT. And I mean, we would probably say, go ahead and take it your freshman year just to see where you're at. A student can take it as soon as they're 13. And we would recommend just going ahead and taking it and seeing where you're at, and then prepping as soon as you can after the close or, nearing the completion of Algebra 2 and geometry, which for many students is going to be closer to the end of their sophomore year, which is probably ideal. Summer after their sophomore year is probably an ideal time to prep and maybe even be completely done with the ACT by December of their junior year, which is before many students have even taken their ACT for the first time. So just something to consider. Doesn't mean we're right about it, but something to consider. Next question that we get a lot is, what is a good ACT score? This is a hairy topic, so I'm not going to spend much time on it other than to say that it is our experience that the vast majority of students with at least a 3.5 GPA are capable of at least a 28 on the ACT. We will also say that the average ACT score for an incoming freshman at UT is typically around a 28 or a 29. So even though the national average is around a 21, this is not a good metric to use to determine whether or not your student is where they need to be to achieve their goals. And it really is all dependent on your goals. If your student has below a 3.5 GPA and they're planning on going to UT, probably a 24, 25, 26 is going to get you accepted. We have students regular with a 3.1 GPA who get accepted at UT with a 25 on their ACT. So it all is dependent on your goals. But if you're trying to compare yourself to the average of the schools you're wanting to go to, like UT, the average incoming freshman at UT is going to be around a 28 or 29. So we would say, the 28 is really what, if you have a smart student, that should be the expectation that, you set it in the home if scholarship dollars are an important part of you. I will also say that the minimum ACT for merit-based scholarship money at UT is a 28. So we told you before that, if you're trying for the volunteer, they now have an option where you don't have to submit an ACT score, but for the guaranteed scholarship and what it has been for many, many years, it fluctuates between a 28 and a 29, but right now, it was a 28 and a 3.8 GPA to get the first level of the volunteer scholarship at UT. And we had mentioned the second level of the Hope Scholarship called the GAMS. And to get that, you need a 29 ACT score. And the GAMS is awesome. And so few parents know about it who call us. But yeah, if you have a 3.75 GPA and a 29 on your ACT, any school that you go to in Tennessee, you have this guaranteed additional money on top of the Hope. It's going to be $1,000 to $1,500 per year, depending on if you're taking summer classes and some other factors. But it's guaranteed money, any school you choose in Tennessee. So if you're wanting to have, a bar, but the beautiful thing, once you get to that 28, everything above that 28 is money at many, many schools. It's like just increasing the money. And you'll see that on the It Pays to Prep scholarship guide that we showed you not too long ago. Another point that is important to make right here is that a bad ACT score says nothing about your student's potential, nothing. And, so many students feel stupid because they have a bad ACT score, but the reality is it's not measuring your intelligence, and so, but on the flip side of that, we will say that a good ACT score says a lot. And that is why, it's important to take into consideration. So bad ACT score doesn't say anything about your potential, but a good ACT score says a lot. And one other thing we'll say on this topic is that a lot of parents get upset with their school for the student not doing well. But as we said before, there is little to no correlation between a high GPA and high ACT scores. The single best predictor that we have noticed of how well a student does on the ACT is a student's reading speed and how many fiction novels they have read for fun in their lives. And we'll come back to reading here when we get to the prepping portion of our session. But if your student has a great GPA, we see a very common, and they score bad on the ACT. It is so common that they haven't read a ton of books in their lifetime. They're not big readers. And we'll just say right now that, if a student reads twice as fast as you, even though this student might know the content more, the student who reads twice as fast is almost certainly going to do better on the test, because the student who knows the content better can't finish the test if they can't read and comprehend fast enough. And we're going to come back to that later, but just, something before you start getting upset with your schools for, maybe not having high ACT scores, just something to take into consideration. All right, next thing is the myths about harder to get high scores. And for your students' sake, please do not buy into the myth that it is harder to get to a higher score. We have parents call us all the time who say things like, my student has a 28 in so-and-so subject, so I think we should focus on the other sections. The reality is that the hard part of the ACT is teaching students the content. Once a student is at a 28, they're getting pretty close to having most of the content down. Then it is more a matter of tying off loose ends and getting their timing down. Those points between a 28 and a 34 on English and reading, are some of the easiest points for a student to win if they just know how to train for them properly. The science can be a bit harder, and the math takes a lot more work because, it really is still a matter of content, no matter what level. But on the math, the scores will continue to go up. All the way until they're getting incredible scores, as long as they keep learning more of the content being tested. Just something, if your student has a higher section of the ACT score that is so often, misconstrued when parents call us, that's probably the easiest points that they're going to get, especially on the English and the reading, to go from that 28 up to the higher numbers. We had the question about taking the ACT multiple times, and we're going to address that now. Families are sometimes worried about taking the ACT multiple times because they're worried that schools will see those scores. The reality is that there are almost no schools in the nation that require students to send all ACT scores, which is not true of the SAT. Of the 10 or so schools that I'm aware of that require all ACT scores be sent, more than half of them simply superscore those test scores anyways. And in the worst case scenario that your student becomes determined to go to one of the handful of schools that it will actually negatively impact them to have taken a test their freshman year that was bad or whatever, you can actually delete out those scores from the ACT. It takes a little bit of work, but it's just filling out a form with the ACT. They'll delete it and it's gone. So the benefit of your student taking the ACT multiple times far outweighs any cons of doing so. A student can take it up to 12 times. And a student, schools are not, sometimes parents are worried that schools are going to see it as weird that they took it a bunch of times. It would be weird if a student didn't take it a bunch of times. The school really just wants to look good themselves. And that is what higher ACT scores are helping them do. So it's in their best interest as well to take your students' highest scores when they're considering them. And the last, part that we're going to talk about on this section is the super scoring. Most of you know about super scoring, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. But for any of you who are new to the process, super scoring is where a school will accept your best score from each of the different sections across multiple tests on the ACT, which is another reason it's a big benefit to take the test multiple times, because maybe one of those tests has one section that lines up more with your student strengths on that section than another test. And so that can be advantageous. And the ACT just recently, this past week or so, made it so that they automatically create a super score for students that can be sent to schools who accept super scores. So probably more schools are even going to go to a super score model, where almost all of them, that are going to be popular around here already do super score. There's a handful. Auburn and Alabama don't, or at least they didn't pre-COVID. So that's one of the popular ones around here that doesn't super score. And there's some others. I think Vanderbilt doesn't, but for the most part, most schools are going to super score. So for time's sake, I'm going to save the questions that are on there for the question and answers section. We have two more topics that I want to talk about. And I'm sure the one most of you are most interested in is how to self-prep for the ACT. And so we'll get to that. But there are 4 resources that so few students and teachers and other around here seem to be unaware of that are pretty awesome resources. And so we just want to make sure that everybody on the call tonight got exposed to these resources, even if they don't necessarily benefit you. More students and families and teachers and counselors around here, we hope, will become aware of these and start to spread the word. So the first resource that we rarely hear of anybody knowing of is QuestBridge. So this only applies to, economically disadvantaged families. Their metric is a family of four that makes $65,000 or less for the household. But if you know of a student who is a great student that is economically disadvantaged, this Quest Bridge is the real deal. And not only getting them in to Ivy League level schools, but getting everything paid for in their experience. And it's free. It's entirely free to any economically disadvantaged student. And, the requirements are the top 5% of their school, and they need to score at least a 28 on the ACT. But if you have a student economically disadvantaged who has those two requirements met, they can almost pick the school that they want to go to, and everything will be paid for. Our students have been the beneficiaries of this. So this is real. And, everybody that I know across the nation who knows about this speaks volumes about this program. It is a really, really great. So if you know a student that meets those requirements, please, spread the word. So the more Knoxvillians and anybody, from wherever you're joining this, take advantage of it. The next resource that we have a lot of parents around Knoxville not know about it. And this does only apply to our Knoxville families. So if you're outside of Knox County, this one wouldn't apply to you. But that's Youth Leadership Knoxville. And this is a program for rising juniors in Knox County. And so few students are applying for this or aware of it. But the whole thing is $150. And it starts with a week-long camp. And then they meet every month. And it's designed to expose top Knox County students to some of the leaders of the different sectors of Knoxville, help develop their leadership skills and get them more involved in the Knoxville community. But like we said earlier, thinking about who you're surrounding yourself with, this is really bringing together the best of the best students in Knox County to build a relationship over a period of a year almost. And it's just an awesome, awesome opportunity to take advantage of. And it's $150 and they get college credit for it. It is a great, great deal. So Youth Leadership Knox is what this is called if you're interested in looking into that. Two other resources. First resource is Super Camp. So this is another camp option. But this is a very popular camp nationwide that very few parents around here seem to know about when we talk to them about it. And they are really getting impressive results. And another impressive thing, it's an academic camp, but a lot of these students end up wanting to go back year after year because of how much they get out of it and enjoy the experience. It is also, like we said, exposing them to, some great students from all across the country. And, I looked online, they only have 3 physical locations that they're doing this summer, but normally these are all over the world and they host a lot of them at some of the best schools in the nation, like Stanford. And so it's a great opportunity. It is going to be on the pricier side, $3,000. So it's not going to be for everybody. But if you want something for a summer opportunity that might really expose your student to things that they're not going to be exposed to normally, and students, across the country that are also like-minded, it could really, have a long-term benefit on their life. So something to consider. And the last resource that we want to talk about before we get to our final section, the self-prepping, is the Future Authoring Program. So in contrast, this one's only $20. So it's really a no-brainer. It is a resource where students are given a bunch of prompts that causes them to think about their future, and specifically thinking about the future that they would want to build for themselves. And a lot of these are generic things, that don't necessarily apply to career or other. And some of them obviously do apply to that. But the stats that this future authoring program have, as far as the impact that it has on students, for the $20 that you spend on it, is money well spent, in our opinion. And especially, and not necessarily especially, but it really helps a broad spectrum of students. If your student is unmotivated, getting them to think about their future in this way can be a great way to get them motivated. And for students who are already motivated, helping them think through things and questions that they're not necessarily considering on their own, this is an awesome resource. I've done it myself, and I still use some of the question prompts on a yearly basis just to get me to think through things, and you might enjoy it yourself as well. So the future authoring program, something to look into. So we're going to go ahead and move into the last section of this self-prepping. We got a little bit later than normal, so we understand if some of you have to take off, but we're going to go ahead and keep plugging along for those of you who are still getting a lot out of what we've been talking about. But I'm going to start off exactly where I had mentioned with the reading fiction, because there's no single more important thing that a student can be doing through their middle school and high school years, in our opinion, as far as preparing them for a great ACT score, than reading fiction regularly. And books are fine. We just notice, any books are fine, obviously, but we just notice a higher correlation with fiction, and we have speculation as to why that is, but it's just something to think about. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. The best thing are things that your students want to read. That is what matters. And if you're looking for like a number metric, 100 books is what we have noticed is like a tipping point. If a student has read 100 fiction novels by the time, or 100 books by the time they, are nearing the end of their ACT prep journey, from when they were kids, they're going to do awesome. And they have potential to do really upper 30s. And a lot of them will almost never score below a 24, regardless of what their GPA is. We actually had a student, a family call us this week who, had a horrible GPA and a 30 on the ACT. And things like this happen because, like we said, there isn't a ton of correlation between ACT and GPA, but other things do obviously correlate, and reading fiction is certainly one of them. A simple way to do this, and is to get your students 20 minutes per day. Get them sold on reading 20 minutes per day. If they do that for 6 months to a year with the intention of increasing their reading speed and comprehension, it is certainly in the realm of possibility they can double their reading speed in a year. And maybe even in 6 months, if they're really intentional about it. And this is not speed reading. Students do not want to be speed reading. They're really just increasing their natural reading speed, that they're retaining about 90+% of what they're reading. So that is our low hanging fruit item for everybody on having your student ready to have a great ACT score. We promise you some timelines. So we're going to run through these different timelines, and these start all the way in middle school. We've just focused on ACT, not admission for this. There's so many admissions and other things, deadlines, and you can find those, and it's different for so many schools. So we're just giving you a general, and this is an idealized timeline. So some of you obviously are past part of this, and that's okay. We're just giving you the idealized timeline. And if you still have young kids that are in middle school, or if you're just here for your middle school students, this, you can get yourself on an ideal timeline, in our opinion. But the middle school years, we think there are 4 things that you could really set yourself up, or a student up, for an advantage if they do these 4 things. 1, reading lots of fiction, ideally a book a month if possible. They certainly have more time in middle school, it seems, than in high school. So it's a great time to do it. 2, become mastery level good at grammar. All the English section, or the majority of the English section that students struggle with, is the grammar. So just being very intentional from the beginning about becoming great at grammar. Number 3, becoming mastery level good at the math foundations. So many students come to us with poor pre-algebra skills, and they can never again be good at math. And they think they're bad at math just because they didn't get the foundations down strong enough, and they're missing harder questions just because they missed a simple step from pre-algebra, even though they're doing everything else right. So, get a tutor, use Khan Academy, do whatever you need to make sure the middle school years your students are building solid math foundations. And the 4th thing is try to have them take advanced math each year, just so that they can be done with that Algebra 2 and geometry, as soon as they can in their high school years. So as far as their freshman year goes, this is the time to get their sights set on that 3.8 GPA. If they mess up their GPA their freshman year, it is hard to recover, because remember, they just really after their junior year if they're planning on going to a larger university. We also recommend they go ahead and take their first ACT their freshman year. It's not for everybody, but just something to consider. Try to plan on them being done with Algebra 2 and geometry by the end of their sophomore year. And sometimes this involves getting parents involved in the planning, because schools are obviously not usually thinking of being done with those by the end of the sophomore year. So, maybe being involved in that part of the process is a good idea. Sophomore year. If your student is finishing Algebra 2 and geometry this year, plan on taking the ACT in December and beginning prepping either in January or that summer. It is very realistic that your student can be done with the ACT by the end of their, summer after their sophomore year, or for sure by the December of their junior year, and can spend the entire next year just focusing on where they want to go to college. So junior year, ideally planning being done taking the ACT in December of their junior year. This will give an entire year, like I just said, to focus on other things. And if they need to get a couple more points on the ACT once they decide where they want to go to college, they still have some leeway to be able to do that. But summer of their junior year, should be doing campus visits and applying to colleges. Like I said, probably you can apply without applying early admission. You can apply early just for regular decision. If it's one of the schools that you find doesn't offer the same amount of scholarships to both. And then their senior year, ideally your student is done with ACT and college admission stuff by the summer before their senior year. And, the last ACT that a student should take for most big schools, or that a student can take for most big schools, is December of their senior year. So that's the last ACT that students can take. Sometimes families think that because the admissions deadline is earlier in December, that they can't take the December ACT. But every school that we're aware of will accept the December ACT as long as you have it automatically sent to the school when they take the ACT. So just something to consider on that front. And so that's our general timeline. And now we're going to talk about actual prepping. So anything your student does is going to be better than nothing, but some methods are certainly more effective than others. So we're going to share the most effective self-prepping methods that we are aware of. First thing that everybody absolutely needs to be a part of your tool bank is crackact.com. Go ahead and write that down, crackact.com. We're pretty sure that what they do is illegal, but the ACT has not been able to close them down, even though they've tried several times. And what they do is they have 50 plus real past administered ACT tests for your students to practice on. And there's just no substitute for having real ACTs to practice with. And this is a free website to be able to have access to all of those. So crackact.com. As far as the best thing we've ever found for prepping for the math, it's quantumactprep.com. This does cost money. I think it's around $50 for 6 months, but they will actually give students video explanations of every one of the math problems from those Crack ACT tests that we just mentioned. If any of you are thinking about doing our program, we've actually partnered with these guys. So all of our students have access to this at no additional charge above our admission. But if you're wanting to self-prep, this is a great tool to increase your math scores at the fastest rate that we are aware of. As far as ACT prep books go, this is the best self-prep guide that we have ever found. It's called The Black Book for the ACT by Mike Barrett. And the great thing about the Black Book is that they have no affiliation with the ACT. So they're going to tell families a lot of things that the ACT doesn't want you to know, and that, the Princeton Review and Kaplan, McGraw-Hill aren't going to tell you. And so for that reason, it makes this a great book to self-prep on the ACT. And it does have, the major flaw with it is it doesn't do the best job of creating like a system to prep, but an easy system that you can use to prep is just doing an hour per day, and plan on doing it for 13 weeks, 3 months, just working through that book at your own pace. It is a great process to use to alleviate that. And if you are thinking about hiring professionals to help with your ACT prep, we hope that you will consider us for your prep. I'm going to take a few, a couple minutes here to tell you a couple little rundown points about us that I'd love for all parents to know. And then I'm going to turn it over to a past parent for a minute to tell you a little about her experience with her students in the program. And then we're going to go to the question and answer section. So the things that I want everybody to know about our program, the main thing is that we are the only program in the nation where students consistently achieve 5, 6, 7, and greater composite increases. You can think I'm lying about that, and I don't blame you, but I hope that you will look at our website and click on our wall of greats, and you will find hundreds and hundreds of students who have done exactly what I'm saying. And so, and I hope you'll look around to see, you're not going to see those types of increases anywhere else, anywhere near as consistently as what our students are achieving those. I teach every one of our classes. And like I said, I have more than 10,000 hours of coaching experience. I love what I do, and I'm pretty good at it based on, our results. Every one of our programs are custom designed for the students, and we do a better job of individual attention than any other program that I'm aware of. Every one of our students gets a dedicated coach who is in contact with them almost every day of the program to answer questions, provide feedback, look over their goals, give encouragement, or whatever else the student needs in pursuit of their goals. They're really there to be their personal cheerleader. Students in our program are going to work way harder than other programs. You're looking at an hour and a half to 2 hours per day, 6 days per week. So students should do the program when they have the availability to put in that level of work. We also are going to be more pricey But I hope everybody will realize it's not comparing apples to apples. The biggest reason that we cost so much more is because of that individual attention of your student having a dedicated coach that is in contact with them every day. You're not going to get that anywhere else. And you got to take that into the cost benefit analysis and our results when you're making that decision. And we also do a money back satisfaction guarantee. So for any family that does our program, if you are unsatisfied with the services we provide, we'll give part or all of your money back, whatever you think is fair. And we've done that for our entire 9+ year history. So it really is a no risk opportunity if you're planning on going the professional route. We have a 13-week program and a 31+ guaranteed year-long program that begin almost every month. And we have a 5-week fast track program 3 times per year. So that's all that I'm going to say about our program. But I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Groon now. She's a teacher at Farragut High School. She's had 2 daughters who have gone through our program. One of them achieved a 7-point increase from a 27 to a 34. The other achieved a 13-point increase from a 21 to a 34. And both of them ended up becoming coaches with us. One of them is still coaching with us. So Kelly has experienced the full spectrum of our program. And I just wanted to turn it over to her to share from a parent's perspective, her experience in the program.
Thanks, Bobby. I will say, everybody, when my oldest daughter, started the program, or I told her about the program, and then we begged my husband to pay for the program, he wasn't excited about it at first because it is pricey. However, and my daughter, when I signed her up for it, laid on the floor and cried. I don't know if Bobby knows that. Jolie did that, and said, I can't believe you're going to make me do this during the summer. But she wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, and she knew she needed a really high ACT score. So she started the program. She worked 1.5 to 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. And she got her score. She got 34 and she got into the Air Force Academy. And then my youngest did the same thing, did the program, did what the coaches said, was encouraged by the coaches. It's an awesome environment because there's competition in it. They have teams that they're competing against in addition to themselves. It's fantastic. It's worth every penny. And my husband came around and said, I would do it again for every kid we have because it pays off. My youngest ended up with a full academic scholarship to UT based solely on ACT and GPA, like Bobby said. So I fully embrace the program and behind it. I tell my students at school, if you are willing to work 1.5 to 2 hours a day, you will find success and you will grow those points that you need. It's almost easy. The program is phenomenal. He's set it up. He lives and breathes ACT. I wish I could go back and take the test because I know just following his program, everybody would do better. So I'm sold. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. A lot of times, when we hear from parents, it's on the not so excited side, and those certainly happen. And that's the reality of every program. But, we do always appreciate hearing happy parents and families.
We're happy.
So, we we know our program isn't for everybody. And so we would just ask if you do know anybody that you think is a good fit for our program, we would certainly appreciate you helping spread the word. But beyond that, we're going to go ahead and jump into these questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and add them. And I'm just going to start at the top and start to work our way down. I'll stay as long as you guys keep asking questions. You're obviously, free to go if you don't have questions or you don't want to hear, any of this stuff or you got other things to do. But I'll be here and we'll begin. So, do your remaining cost numbers include room and board? And they do not. The numbers that we give are tuition and fees on the ACT prep guide. It's just tuition and fees. So yes, that does not include, yeah. Oh, wait, I did something wrong here. Yeah, so that does not include the room and board. That would be in addition. If a student is offered an opportunity for 30 hours of dual enrollment as a high school student, will that then make them a transfer student, or would they still be considered a freshman eligible for scholarship? Yeah, as far as I know, I've never heard of somebody losing their freshman eligibility unless they have officially graduated from high school. So I've never heard of a student having too many, AP credits or dual enrollment credits that they were no longer considered freshmen. I mean, they might not be a freshman per se, but they're still going to be eligible for all of the freshman scholarships. And yeah, I mean, I can't say that it has never happened, but I can't imagine it has ever happened. So that'd be a great problem to have, and I know students that didn't have to do the freshman and even part of their sophomore year because of the number of AP and dual enrollment classes that they'd taken. So take a bunch, is worth it. Ms. Graham said, I think in response to that, dual enrollment is considered high school credit as well. So that is not solely a college credit. Therefore, it won't count towards transfer credits. So yeah, that, is from Ms. Graham. She's school counselor at HBA. The Hope and GAM scholarships do not super score though, is from Ms. Metcalf. Thank you for clearing that up. So they apparently do not super score for the Hope and the GAMs. You actually have to get a 21 or a 29 on the ACT. UTC did not take our daughter's December score. So yeah, there is an example of a situation where that happened. I'm really surprised by that. UTC is a school that specifically told us that they do take December scores. So I don't know if maybe, it wasn't automatically, put to send to those schools as soon as the ACT were done. But, regardless, it is something to always look into with your school to make sure that they are going to accept whatever ACT score, the December ACT scores that your student is taking their senior year. Yeah. All right. The Crack ACT website came up as error 526. Can you share the link? Yeah, I will go ahead. I'll just check it here with everybody on just to make sure that we're getting it correct. All right, so crackact.com. And this is what I get when I put in crackact.com. So I'll go ahead and copy that. But yeah, this is the website. And then here are all the tests. You can click it. It's obviously super ad all over the place, but that's how they are able to do it for free. But yeah, so I will go ahead and send this to everyone in case it's not coming up for you. So there's the link to Crack ACT. Okay, never mind. I see afterwards it came up. All right, and Ms. Graham put it on there as well. All right, define weighted versus non-weighted GPA. So some schools, maybe all schools, probably not all schools, but if you take an AP class or an honors class, these are based off of a scale higher than 4.0. And the different classes sometimes weight them differently, depending on if AP or honors or what it is. And so that's what weighted means, is it's not only off of classes on a 4.0 scale, it also weights in the difficulty of those harder classes via a higher weighted scale above a 4.0 averaged in with your normal 4.0 weighted classes. So it just makes it so students aren't discouraged from taking those harder classes, even if they might get a lower score, a letter grade score, it's still often going to be weighted the same. So it just gives students confidence in taking those harder classes, and it gives students a reward for those that are able to do well in those higher classes, and maybe giving them a score even above a 4.0. Another student we got is Hope Scholarship for Tennessee schools. And yes, the Hope Scholarship is for Tennessee schools. All right, which schools have the lowest dropout rates around here? We do have a list of the dropout rates on the It Pays a Prep. I mean, it's not the dropout rates, it's the graduation rates. And I don't know them off the top of my head. I mean, UT has an excellent one. Vanderbilt has an excellent graduation rate. So I would recommend that you look at the It Pays a Prep guide to be able to see schools around here and their graduation rates. All right, the next question is, one second here. All right, and I see that, Ms. Bailey included what, weighted is, a good explanation there. All right, when you're going to resume offering practice full-length tests at South College. So when South College opens back up, UT isn't letting us do the mock ACT. So for those that are unfamiliar, we used to do 4 mock ACTs per year that gave students an opportunity to come and just take an ACT for free in a real administered situation. And so we're really just waiting for South College and UT to host us again. We do the event for free. And so all the places that are big enough to host the students, pretty much aren't letting us come because of how many students we typically have. And, it doesn't make sense to do a half capacity right now. So hopefully now that everybody's getting the vaccine and things are opening up, it will be happening soon. I would anticipate we're in the fall, but we are at the mercy of what these South College and UT are going to allow, are going to host us. So hopefully soon. Do you have any comments on the effect of COVID and missing most of a class like geometry? I don't have any comments on that, and I probably wouldn't even if I did. I'll leave that one. All right. Do colleges consider high school sports or scouts in admissions? Different schools are it depends on, certainly some of them are going to look at any leadership or membership experience as a positive light. Especially students can work that into their essays. If they had like a passion project that they did in scouts, their project, it's a great thing that some of them write their essays about. But every school is going to be different, and that's not really something I'm very knowledgeable on. So so that is it looks like all of the questions on there. Did I miss any questions, or does anybody have any remaining questions that they would like to ask us? Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sticking this out all the way. We certainly appreciate you being a part of this and letting us be a part of the community. And if there is any way that we can ever help you, regardless if you do our program or not, we're always happy to help any family that gives us a call. 865-643-6030 is our number. And we're here to help. So you guys have an awesome rest of your night, and we look forward to next time.